Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the cottage kitchen at the Elliott homestead. It's really easy to do sourdough in summertime. We often think of sourdough as something that we should do in the wintertime, but really in the summer, our kitchens are naturally warmer, which makes the fermentation go a little bit faster and a little bit more active. So if you've been on the sourdough fence for a while, this is a great season to jump in. And we're gonna make something a little unique with sourdough today, together in the kitchen. So oftentimes we think of sourdough as bread, which is wonderful, and it has all kinds of digestive enzymes, and it breaks down gluten, and it feeds our gut with all kinds of wonderful bacteria. All big benefits. We can take those same benefits and we can apply them to all kinds of baked goods in the kitchen, like this sourdough cake we're gonna make together today with Italian honey meringue. It's naturally sweetened, full of nutrient-rich ingredients, and it tastes delicious. Before we dive into today's cake making, I want to invite you to our one and only sourdough workshop that we're gonna be teaching this year. It's gonna take place at the end of June, and the space is very limited. We keep these very small and intimate. So here's how it works. I'm gonna put a link below the video to where you can reserve your spot, and please try to do that at least a week before the workshop. We mail you a package physically in the mail that includes a signed cookbook, an Elliott Homestead apron, an active piece of my own sourdough starter, and our workshop packet and recipes that we're going to be cooking together during the workshop. So this takes place online. You can join me from anywhere in the world, from any kitchen you desire. Bring your sister, bring a friend. We're gonna meet for 3 hours online, and it's gonna be recorded so that you can go back and watch it again and again until you really hammer down on some of these sourdough basics. But not only that, we're gonna be covering sourdough in a lot of different ways, and I'm gonna show you how it's way more flexible than you think. I tell my workshop participants every time we do this, y'all take it way too seriously. Just relax. It's way more flexible than you think. So if you'd like to join us in our workshop, I'll put a link to that below the video. I'm also gonna be mailing out this exact recipe. So if you want this recipe that we're gonna make together today, just make sure you get on our newsletter list, which is also below the video. Okay, that was a lot of words. Let's get to the basics of making this cake together. This is not going to be leavened by sourdough, even though we're gonna use sourdough to break down our gluten, to make our cake really nutrient dense and digestible for us. So one of the ways that we do that is just by starting with a really digestible flour. In this case, I'm gonna be using einkorn flour. It lends itself really well to cakes because it's really soft. It has a really weak gluten anyway, really high protein, really high mineral content. And so already we're starting our cake off with a bang. I've got 275 grams of my einkorn flour there. Now to it, I'm going to be adding in my sourdough starter, about 275 grams of sourdough starter as well. So most people keep a sourdough starter at a 1-to-1 ratio. What that means is that they feed it 1 cup of flour, 1 cup of water, equal parts. I keep a dry sourdough starter, which means I feed it a lot less water. So the night before I want to make this cake, I activate that by just taking a little piece of it, think like a teaspoon or so, then adding in equal parts flour and water. And when I leave that out, this is the bubbly active sourdough starter that I get the next morning. So if you keep a normal starter, you can just use it right out of your container. If you keep a dry starter like me, it's great to hydrate it at a 1-to-1 ratio so that you've got the right consistency for making a cake. Okay, 275 grams of flour, and I've already pre-measured this, so we're gonna add in all of our sourdough starter. Now, a lot of times you'll see these really great recipes using sourdough. The problem is then you'll bake it instantly. And so it doesn't give the sourdough a chance to do anything. So maybe you're using your discard so that it doesn't go to waste, but you're not getting any of the digestion benefits of using sourdough unless you leave it out and you give it time to break down that flour and break down that gluten. So we need to give this time. This isn't an instant cake, but it's almost completely hands-off. So I've got my flour and my sourdough starter. I've got my melted butter here. I've been making butter from Cece's milk again, and it's so good. Before we add the butter, I'm gonna add in some milk. This is also from Cece. She's giving us a lot of milk right now. Cece's my dairy cow, by the way, for those of you who are new here. Flour, sourdough starter, milk, butter. Look how yellow that is. Incredible. These are all nutrient-packed ingredients. Look at that. It just it looks wonderful. All right, all that's left to do now, can you see that butter? Oh my word, it's like a sunflower, is to mix these together. And this will come together just like any normal cake batter would. But unlike any normal cake, we're gonna set this aside now and we're gonna go about our day and we're gonna forget about it. Now, depending on how much digestive enzymes and how much you want that gluten in the cake to break down, you could leave this for up to 12 hours at room temperature. I usually let it go maybe between 4 and 5 hours, which gives the sourdough a good amount of time to start to break down that gluten and to add all of its digestive benefits. And so simple as that. I'm just gonna cover this, I'm gonna set it aside, then we're gonna come back together, finish mixing the cake, and bake something really delicious.
The work that we do in our kitchens can be fun, nourishing, and delicious. I want to personally invite you right now to join the Elliott Homestead cooking community. You can visit cook.theelliottHomestead.com to get started. As a cooking community member, you'll get 5 whole food, nourishing, and inspired recipes each month created from scratch in my kitchen and delivered straight to you. I've also created an instructional video to go along with each recipe, which you can now access from our app so that you can learn new skills and begin to enjoy new dishes and flavor with me right alongside you. The cooking community is a place of inspiration and community where you can learn and chat with other home cooks on the app, join our book group, be a part of our monthly live Q&A calls, or simply enjoy the bountiful recipes that you'll find each month in your mailbox or inbox. You can visit cook.theelliottHomestead.com right now, choose the membership package that's right for you, and let's get cooking.
All right, after we've given the sourdough some time to do its work, which by the way, not only adds all those enzymes that we've been talking about, but it also adds a really wonderful kind of complex flavor to the cake. One of my complaints about most cakes is that they're too sweet and they just kind of lack interest. And you see this sort of countered by the addition of things like sour cream or Greek yogurt, things that have a little bit more flavor complexity. Sourdough is one of those things. I've got a 10-inch springform pan here, and all springform means is it's got this great little doohickey on the side, which makes the cake really easy to get out of the pan. And I line it with a piece of parchment paper, just like this. My oven is preheating to 350 degrees, and really we just need to add a few more ingredients into our cake to get it to be delicious. Now, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we're not actually using the sourdough to make our cake rise, to give it those bubbles and make it nice and light and fluffy. I'm going to be using baking soda and baking powder to leaven my cake, which is a really traditional way to leaven a cake. We use that sourdough for flavor and for nutritional benefit, but now we want to make it lift up. And we're going to do that with the addition of that. We've also got some vanilla extract and some salt and some eggs. So just a few more ingredients. Oh, and some melted honey to make it delicious. One of the things I love about this cake is that it's naturally sweetened with honey, which has its own complete flavor profile and taste. When you taste honey, you know exactly what you're tasting. It adds interest to where there's usually just white sugar, which doesn't have a flavor. It has a sweet aspect to it, but no flavor. Instead, we've got something that can really stand on its own and actually really add something of interest to the cake. All right, we're almost there already. All this cake takes is a little bit of patience and some really good ingredients. All right, time to leaven our cake. And of course, anything that you cook, almost anything, needs a little bit of salt because salt brings out the sweet. Salt adds complexity of flavor. So it might seem odd to add salt to something sweet, but it makes the sweet sweeter. All right, baking soda and baking powder. I'm just gonna sprinkle my baking powder, salt, and baking soda straight over top the cake. Make sure there's no clumps. And now we're gonna fold it in. Look at that beautiful dough. Makes me so happy. Looks just like honey in dough form. The cool thing about baking powder and baking soda is that they react with acids. That's what gives them their rise. And so because we've made our dough more acidic by adding in our sourdough, we should get a really beautiful rise on this. Now, this is never going to be like an angel food cake or like some sort of fancy thing you'd see on the Great British Baking Show, because that's not this type of cake. It's naturally sweetened. It's broken down and fermented with sourdough. It's enriched with really nice heirloom grains that really have some substance to them. So it's never meant to be, you know, like a really fancy sponge cake. That's not the goal here. The goal is to make a cake that has something to say and that really reflects, you know, a piece of the baker, which I think this does perfectly. Okay, we're folded, we're mixed. Into our pan we go. Actually, before I do that, I don't have any more butter out here now, so I'm gonna use some olive oil and grease my pan just a little bit. This is a 10-inch springform pan, but you could really put this in any kind of pan you have. All right, and in we go. And that looks beautiful. So this is gonna go into our oven, bake until set, and then we gotta let it cool. We're gonna make a beautiful honey Italian meringue, but we cannot put that on the cake until it's completely cool. So just make sure you start this step and allow for it to cool before you decorate it, or you're gonna end up with a sticky mess. So let's bake it. Juliet, while the cake bakes, should we go pick out some flowers to put on top? You wanna help me? Okay. It's now time for us to make our Italian meringue that's gonna go on top of our sourdough honey cake. This is one of my favorite parts. Meringue has such a nostalgic flavor and texture to me. My grandma made me a cake, a white cake with a meringue on it when I was turning 6. That was the last birthday that she was there for. And so after that, my grandpa would always make us lemon meringue pies for our birthdays. He was the baker, and so he would bring over these pies every single birthday. Always lemon meringue. It's always something to look forward to. My meringue is a little bit different than my grandpa's, but it still has that nostalgic flavor and taste to me, and it's so sticky and so good. We're gonna make ours with honey. So really simple. You can do this by hand, by the way, but you're just gonna have to use your muscles. I've got 3 egg whites. I'm also gonna add a pinch of salt to my egg whites. That helps them to get nice and stiff and whip up just a little bit easier. While my egg whites are starting to whip with that pinch of salt, I'm gonna melt a 1/2 cup of honey on the stovetop until it reaches 240 degrees. This just means that it's really rapidly bubbling. It's good and hot. Once that happens, we can slowly start to drizzle it into our whipped egg whites. All right, you gotta be a little patient here. Let that mixer go for 10 minutes. If you're doing this by hand, I'm super sorry. You are gonna have some sore biceps. But we need that meringue to be really stiff and really shiny, and that's how we know it's done. All right, we're gonna use the tried and true old method of just sticking a butter knife into our cake to test for doneness, usually around 30 to 35 minutes. You don't wanna overcook any cake, but you really don't wanna overcook this cake. It'll just make it a little heavy and a little bit dry. So err just slightly on the side of underbaking if you're not sure. Plus, it's gonna come out of the oven and it's going to cool, and that means it's gonna continue to cook slightly. So err just slightly on underbaked, but this should still come out clean when we insert it. So let's check. Oh, it looks good. It smells so incredible. All right, clean knife means it's time to pull the cake out. Look at it, it's just blonde and beautiful. While Juliet finishes cutting strawberries, our meringue has finished. So, great way to test for this is to get your whisk into that meringue and then flip it over. And you see that beautiful little wave on top? It's exactly what we want to see. When my grandpa used to make lemon meringue pies, these would always be toasted, so they would always be a little bit golden brown. I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna decorate our little springtime sourdough honey strawberry flour cake with this meringue just as it is, because it's so good and it's so reflective of whatever honey it is that you use to make the frosting. It's incredible how strong the flavor of honey is. So make sure that you like yours before you do it. This also happens to be my birthday month, which is, of course, a wonderful month. May is a great month. And my mom got me this beautiful cake platter for my birthday. So I thought it would be fun to dress our little cake on this platter. This is the first cake plate I've had. So I feel like a grown-up now. All right, should we put it together? Let's do it. I'm gonna be honest, you guys, super fancy cakes, they just don't do it for me. And for me, my palate, they don't usually taste that good. I would much prefer a super rustic homemade farm cake, just like this one. It has something to it. It has a personality. So should we put the cake together? We should? Oh, it's gonna be such a treat. All right. See how shiny this meringue is? It's so beautiful. Reminds me of Grand Grandpa so much. Do you want to, Juge? I'm gonna take some of it, okay? There you go. She just left. She's like, that's all I wanted. beautiful this is, Juju. It's so pretty. Of course, you can use whatever edible flowers that you have around your own garden, or you could just eat it with the plang meringue. Plang meringue. That's gonna be delicious. Okay, so there you have it, our sourdough honey cake. Just one of the very best cakes in the world. This was originally a cooking community recipe, and it feels very special to be able to share it with you all. Of course, if you want to learn more about the versatility of sourdough baking, make sure you join our workshop. All that information and the exact recipe for this cake is going to be in the newsletter below the video. We'll see you over there. Until next time, cheers.